You're listening to the Word Slinger Podcast, Episode 17, Supernatural Thrills and Spills with Joanna, Penn. This episode of the Word Slinger Podcast is brought to you by my series, Sawyer Jackson. Right now we're at Sawyer Jackson and the Shadows Strait, but you can get started on Sawyer Jackson and the Long Land anytime you like. Come check it out at kevintomlinson.com/books.
It's the Word Slinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented Pants Optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Word Slinger.
Word Slinger.
Hey, this is Kevin Tomlinson, the Word Slinger. And I just wanted to say, first, before I get started on anything else, I want to say Happy New Year to you. Because by my account, that should be happening to you probably yesterday. For me, it's like 2 days away. So, but anyway. And, you know, I don't know where you are. You could be listening to this like a year from now, for all I know. But welcome, if that's the case. So, and thanks for looking back. But, you know, as I'm getting closer to the end of this year, it's 2014 right now. It's going to be 2015 in a couple of days. But looking back on 2014, it's been just an amazing year. I mean, just so many things. I've accomplished so many things this year that I you know, a year ago this time were just dreams for me. You know, I focused intently on my author business, and that has done much better. It's not at the level I want it to be, but I'm looking at 2015 as the I'm officially dubbing that the year of the author. So if you're an indie author, this is going to be your year, man. I'm putting all that energy out there. It's definitely going to be the year of the author for me, because this year I've already got my planning done. I've already got a lot of things in progress. Nick Thacker and I are continuing to work on our joint projects together, and some of that includes marketing and some new resources. You know, I'm building some resources for other authors, because part of my mission, part of my goals, one of my goals is to not only build things that enhance my own lifestyle and you know, help me accomplish my dreams, but I want to help other people accomplish their dreams too, which is part of the reason for this podcast. This is the podcast about story, and I have this vision of story shaping the lives of everyone. You know, we can use story as a tool to shape our lives. I think we can choose our story, and choose our own identity, as it were. So that's part of what I'm doing in 2015, and I hope you'll stick around for that. And I hope you'll enjoy it, because there's so much we can learn from the stories of others, and then re-examining our own stories. I recently started looking at all my old journals from years past. I mean, these things go back all the way. The earliest one I've found so far is something I wrote in 1982, which, if you do the math, I mean, that's quite a while back. And it puts me in around, I think, second grade, I think. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think I was in second grade. Mrs. Drury in second grade. But the thing is, as I go forward in these things, and I'm looking at myself progressing, I'm so happy that I kept those journals, because they just opened up a whole new world for me now. Like, I'm looking back and realizing I spent all those years, like, I would joke that I don't know what I want to be. I don't know what I will be when I grow up. And lo and behold, I actually have been doing the same thing my whole life. I started writing professionally when I was 12. I started, you know, I got into a career in media and marketing, and, you know, all these things came together. And the whole time I'm like, man, I just don't know what I want to do with myself. I just don't know. And the writing's been there all along. So I've talked about writing books. I mean, I've literally talked about writing books since I was about 5 years old. So, yeah, that's how ridiculous this word slinger is. So if you're looking for those kind of changes in your life, you're meeting those kind of dreams, let me tell you, I got a great episode today, because I talked with author Joanna Penn, and she's an award-winning author. Well, I think she's award-winning. I don't want to make a claim that's not true, but I know she's definitely a best-selling author. She's won the award of my heart. So if she hasn't won any other awards, at least she's got that. The official Word Slinger Award of the Heart. We'll get that going in 2015. So prize forthcoming, Joanna. So you're going to really enjoy this, I think, because I know I really enjoyed it. It's a blast talking to Joanna, and she's such a sweet soul. Like, just somebody I really enjoy listening to her. I listen to her podcast on the Creative Penn. I read her blog. I listen to interviews with her on other podcasts, and it was a thrill and it was an honor to get a chance to talk to her today. So, that said, why don't we get into this interview? That's what you tuned in for, right? So, at any rate, I want to. I'll get to the mushy stuff after the show. How's that? You take a listen to Joanna Penn and all her talk about her career and her work, and I hope you really enjoy it, and see you after the show. Hi, everybody. So today I'm with somebody that I follow quite a bit online, Joanna Penn from Creative Penn. She's a best-selling author. She gets to have the whole New York Times and USA Today best-selling author title behind her name, and she's one of the few people I know who has a literal pen name. So, how are you, Joanna? How you doing?
Oh, good. Thanks for having me on the show, Kevin. It's always good to have a chat.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I know you're always slammed, and I sometimes feel guilty trying to get people on the show. I don't know why.
Oh, no. And the funny thing is, it used to be before podcasting kind of really took off, people would always say, oh, can you write a guest post for my blog? And I think, it's almost like guest posting is so difficult now. But I love, just coming on a podcast, especially with the Americans where you are being in America. It's my evening. So I've clocked off for the day. This is fun for me. So it's great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no problem at all. Here I'm kind of just getting into my morning. Actually, I've been rolling since about 5 a.m. here, so I could. This is a nice welcome break for me. So, talking about guest posts, I actually that was something I wanted to ask you about because I had recently been just tooling around and I noticed that some time ago actually you had actually cut off accepting guest posts on your blog. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. Well, there was a couple of things. One is that guest posts take a lot more work than you expect because, you have to have the tone of your site. You have to have an introduction. You have to, even if they do the initial formatting, you've got to make sure the images are good. And, sure, you can have a VA do that, but, then you're paying someone. And I thought about it. And one, I wanted to take some workload off me and also, why pay for a VA? And, secondly, my site is pretty big now and I didn't really need the content. But thirdly, I thought I'd just gone through a process of kind of culling my own RSS feeds. I used to follow, a couple of hundred blogs. And when I actually looked at the ones that I still read after several years, they all have personality and they're all based on actual individuals. And I've kind of stopped following, blogs with more than one, person. It's different on a podcast because you're the host. People are actually following you and the guests you choose, but they're not here for me. They're here for you and what you bring. And the same on anybody's blog. It's actually about your voice, about your unique take on whatever you're talking about and personality. So I just decided to focus on sharing my journey and keeping it simple, really.
Yeah, and you do so much to help this huge community. It's bizarre how big this community has gotten, and everyone's always so willing to help each other, which is beautiful.
Yeah, it is, and I love that. It's funny, you hear about some terrible stories, and I know for some people the internet is a difficult place, but for me it's been amazing. I've been able to leave my day job. All my friends I pretty much met on Twitter. My friends in real life I met on Twitter, and I can talk to people around the world because of my show, and talk to you because of my blog. So yeah, my internet is fantastic, and I love the indie community for that reason. So
this is all part of your sort of ongoing story, which is really fascinating. And I know you talk to thousands of people. I'm assuming thousands about self-publishing. I hear you everywhere, by the way. In fact, I did not. I never listened to an episode of your show until I'd heard you on like 15 other podcasts. So
I'm not sure that's a good thing.
Well, okay. So no, I was always meaning to. We'll say that. But so you've got this evolving story, and that's what this podcast, by the way, is all about: is story and how it sort of impacts our our culture and our lives and our careers. And you've got this really interesting ongoing story where you publish your own work, but you also help other people. How do you see story as a sort of through line in the work beyond just your fiction?
Well, I mean, like you mentioned, my own personal story, it could be construed as the, the hero's journey, like many of us.
Yeah.
It's that kind of, oh my God, after I worked as a business and IT consultant for 13 years, implementing accounts payable into large corporates, and one of those kind of awful. This is not the quest of your life, basically.
Right.
This is the day job that pays the bills, and that kind of golden handcuffs, approach. Where I had the big house and the car and the great job, and I had everything I was meant to have by the age of sort of 33, but was really miserable. So the kind of the hero's journey thing was sort of, the call is find what you really love with your life and do that, even if
Right.
you have to give up everything else. And so pretty much that my journey was that I started writing part-time, while I was working in the evenings and weekends, started a podcast, started blogging, and at the same time, I was sharing my journey, because I got, like many people when they first start off doing something new, I made all the mistakes. I fell into the traps, paid the wrong people too much money, got ripped
Right.
off. But I kind of carried on through those traps to where I am today. And I actually left my day job like 3 years ago, and I'm a full-time author. And like you said, I write thrillers and I write nonfiction, and I help other people with kind of getting their words out into the world. But, I no longer have, I no longer have the life I used to have, but I live a much happier life. So I still feel I'm on the journey, very much so, got a long way to go, but I'm a completely different person than I was, every year I think we become different people. It's
Yeah.
another benefit of blogging and podcasting. I've just passed episode 200 on my show, and, you listen to episode 1 for me, which was like 4.5 years ago, and I hadn't written fiction. I never even thought I would write fiction. So yeah, my own kind of story is, I guess, one of change and, a journey just like anyone.
So do you think that because of where you started, do you think you had a sort of an advantage at that point, or were you sort of working against your past success?
What do you mean in?
Well, you said when you hit your 30s, you already had a career, you already had sort of reached a certain level of success, and then you decided this was something you wanted to do. Do you think it helped or hurt that you started at that point?
It's funny. Obviously we have well, I say we have no choice. I mean, I basically spent 13 years climbing a ladder only to find that was the wrong ladder. So I then had to start climbing another ladder. But I should also add that I tried running a scuba diving business. I tried property investment. I tried a number of different ladders. So I think that kind of fail fast entrepreneurial attitude is something I've generally embraced. I think I'm not afraid to try things and fail and try something else. But I don't consider that career a success. Being an accounts payable consultant, yeah, sure. According to the world, getting paid 6 figures or whatever is a success. But for me, that just wasn't. I was crying every day at work, and also I resent this sometimes now. And whenever I meet millennials, I'm kind of always just, don't listen to the establishment. I feel like every year I'm uneducating myself from the years of establishment. I did a traditional degree at Oxford. I had a traditional job. I was very much in a traditional mold, and I feel like now we have to break out of that. Like, unless we break out of that, we won't be able to be successful in this new world. So I'm a little, well, not resentful, but I look at everything all the boxes that I built for myself actually hemmed me in, and I try and break out of that all the time now.
It does feel a little bit like at times I'm sort of waving my arms wildly, trying to get someone to turn around and go back, though. Do you experience that? Like because I know the path I took. It's not all that dissimilar to what you did, by the way. And I've gone in and out of like freelance careers, we'll say, for the past 20 some odd years. So I have the same experience, I think. So do you feel sometimes like I mean You're a guy, you're a guru in this. I mean, I'm sorry, you are. People are going to turn to you because you know what you're talking about. You've done it. So, do you ever bump your head up against a brick wall with some folks? Like they just don't want to hear the right advice.
Oh yeah. Well, I think this happens in every community. I mean, it really
Yeah.
must do. But what's so funny, of course, is I started self-publishing. I started podcasting before these things were trendy.
Yeah.
When I started blogging about self-publishing, it was like howling into the wind. This was sort of 2008.
I was doing it before it was cool.
Yeah, I was. But I mean, as in there was no international Kindle, there was no
Yeah.
KDP. Self-publishing still had that awful stigma of it's just, you only do it if you can't get a publisher, which is just,
Right.
was ridiculous anyway, because entrepreneurs have always self-published.
Right.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of people say now, oh, if you self-publish, the sort of Kindle gold rush
Yeah.
kind of attitude and all that, but it's still the same as it ever was. It's like it took me 13 years to climb up that particular ladder and end up in the wrong place. It's going to take me 13 years to climb up this new ladder and become a success in my new career. So people seem to think they can, quit a job and become a full-time writer without putting in the learning the craft and
Right. Yeah.
building a business. And so I'm 3 years full time into this, and I have 3 years part time before that. But I figure you need 5 years full time on a business before you see decent profits.
Right.
I'm making good money, but it's not what you would want. So
Right.
but I feel like I'm on the right ladder, and that for me I think is everybody's difficulty in life is
Yeah.
deciding what the right ladder is. And I'm thankfully I found my own, but I do think a lot of people are jumping into writing books right now who perhaps aren't passionate about writing and about books. I'm so surprised at the number of people who want to write a book who've never read a book.
Right. Yeah. I know that.
I'm
That
just like,
shocks
back
me.
off, go do something else.
Well, I'm looking at trying my hand at brain surgery, actually.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe not brain surgery, but there is a point. For example, writing a novel, I do believe that pretty much, writing nonfiction is not, is easier. Writing a novel is blooming difficult.
Yeah.
You have to learn so many different skills. You've written several,
Oh, yeah.
haven't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like, well, you have to learn so much.
Yeah.
People don't seem to realize that.
They don't think of it as learning. They think of it
Yeah.
as I'm just going to make up a story, and I'm going to make up people, and I'm going to make up a place, and they don't realize there's a component of education involved in designing that world and those characters.
Yeah, exactly. And actually and actually thinking about the reader. I think in any business, you have to think about who's going to buy your end product.
Right.
And if you don't, this is people say to me all the time, well, how do I sell more books? And you look at the book that they bring you, and you do coaching, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
People bring you a book and you're like, well, it's the memoirs of your grandmother's
Right.
knitting circle or whatever, although knitting's pretty popular these days, but you know what I mean. It's like you need to write a book that people want to read, and that will really help. And there's a site, if people don't know, called author.earnings.com. Have you
Yes.
seen that?
Yeah, Hugh Howey's.
Hugh Howey's
brainchild,
site. So
yeah.
author.earnings.com. People go on there. They have a report from the top 50,000 best-selling books on Amazon, broken down by genre.
Right.
And you just have to take one look at that to kind of realize, okay, so if I'm not writing in the top selling genres, my market possibility is that much smaller.
Right.
Then if I'm in that smaller market, how do I reach those people? So, if you want to make money at this, you have to look at it as a business.
And that's the distinguishing mark, though. If you want to make money at it, if you want to make a living at it, because there's nothing wrong with sitting down and writing a book about the African boll weevil or whatever. If that's what you're interested in, and you think you've got an audience, it's probably going to be a small audience, right? But
Yeah,
nothing
but
wrong
what's
with that.
there's nothing wrong with that. But what's so funny, and I say this all the time, it's like I helped my 9-year-old niece self-publish her book. Brilliant,
Oh
not a
yeah.
commercial prospect. Fantastic. Helped my 65-year-old dad do it as well. But what was funny, like with my dad, he's a classic example of this case. It's like, okay, well, I'll help you write your. It is actually a thriller, historical thriller about Sardinia. So it could potentially have an audience. But
Right.
he didn't intend it as a business. It was more of a personal project. So it fits into the personal project thing. And then he says to me after we've published it, so why isn't it selling loads of copies? So what's so funny is so many of these people who say it is just a creative project
Yes.
then wonder why it's not selling.
Do you think it's big? I have a theory about that because my mother-in-law, my father, everyone in my family, well, now that I've done it, is looking at this, and they have the same expectation. They have the same comment. I just want to write it. I just want to have fun with it, and then once it's up, they're wondering why it's not selling. So, do you think that's well, first, I think that's probably pretty common, but I mean, do you think that's born out of the fear that they won't do well?
I think it's born out of a myth that the publishing industry has stoked for many, many years. What there's been in the publishing industry is kind of a veil of mystery over what they do, over everything, over the whole process. But what's happened in the last, four, probably even only 3 years, for the first time ever, authors have been blogging about their income, about their process.
Right.
They've been sharing contracts. They've been, there's been this kind of veil of secrecy has been torn down. And what's so fascinating now is you can see past. I'd rather call it a myth than a lie, but the fact is,
You're so
authors
kind.
yeah, but basically, authors have hidden how little money they've made. It looks like these authors have done amazingly well. It's similar to the music industry where you see some mega hit and that artist didn't actually earn any money.
Right. Yes.
This has been the truth because the moment you license your copyright to another company, they're the ones who generally make the money. So I think the myth of the kind of write a book and make a million has been very pervasive.
Right.
Even though 99% of authors never got treated that way, we've only heard we've reported on people like J.K. Rowling and Stephen King, and in the same way we now report on the breakout indie successes like Hugh Howey and Bella Andre and people like that. So yeah, I think we all need a role model and a dream. And my dream is Stephen King. He's on my wall. He's my kind of idol.
Yeah.
But he's 65.
Yeah.
So as far as I'm concerned, I've got 25 years to get to where he is.
It's not the worst of goals or plans.
No, exactly. It's to be one of the best loved, best storytellers in the world, and earning a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
But mainly because he pleases his audience.
Right.
That's
There's another component to that too for Stephen King, at least, in that he's writing books, but he owns a piece of that when it goes to these films that no one watches, by the way, or the television shows or whatever. Isn't it amazing how they keep making stuff based on Stephen King books that always does poorly, but they just keep making it?
Yeah, it's fun. Well, I think that's the way, isn't it? As soon as you have a big name, then it kind of has some kind of cachet.
Yeah.
But equally, I went to a screenwriters festival the other week, and I'm going to Robert McKee's Story conference this weekend, which is an iconic screenwriting thing, because I'm fascinated about this kind of adaptation. What I've learned is that adaptation, like audiobook narration or translation, is and any others on the end, but basically it's a partnership, and the other creative person takes what you've done and then kind of riffs off that. So plus Stephen King's, like, for example, The Stand, which is my favorite book.
Oh yeah, I love The Stand.
Yeah, you just can't. I mean, it's
How do you make that?
Yeah, it's just too much.
Although I thought they did a decent job with the miniseries. I thought that was decent. Not great,
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Yeah, and I just read it. Another, but a lot of this kind of, for me, the supernatural and the dark horror stuff, which I write to a point. it's better to finish in your mind. It's better to have the impression of something demonic than try and portray demonic on the
Yes.
screen.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I mean, in fact, I get disappointed often when I've read a book and then I see the adaptation for it and the creature is nowhere near as frightening as it was in my
Mm,
head.
mm. Yeah,
So
exactly.
you brought up a really this is something I've discussed at length with numerous people, but the idea of the co-creation process when it comes to audiobooks or any form of adaptation of your work, and authors tend to have a difficult time with this because they still see it as their words. But I think you hit on something there with the idea that you are co-creating with these people.
Well, and it's funny you say authors find this difficult. I get really annoyed with those people who talk about, and it's mainly women, to be fair, who talk
Yeah.
about birthing a book and the
Oh yeah.
book is their baby. I'm just like, oh, come on, that's ridiculous. Especially when you get, I've got 12 books now,
Right.
and I'm intending to write several hundred across my lifetime. You
Right.
don't want that many babies. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But I think once you start thinking about this, once you've got more than one book, once you've got more than like 5 books, I think it's probably the tipping point. You become less connected or less
Yeah.
less caring in a way about all of them. It kind of you've written the book, it's finished, and then to me, like I've just listened to Delirium, one of my London psychic books on audiobook, and it'll be coming out soon. And it's almost like I'd forgotten the book entirely. So the take that my audiobook narrator does with it, I really enjoy. She made one character Scottish when he was never Scottish in my head, but that doesn't matter. I liked her take on it. And, I have a Nigerian character, and her Nigerian accent was just awesome. A Nigerian British.
Yeah.
And she's she's living in America, my narrator. And
Wow.
she really got it. And I was like, that's awesome, because we have a lot of Nigerians in Britain. And so it was, I love it. I love this process of all of these different things, and I've got several translators as well. And I have a few copies here right now. So looking at a German book in German, which has my name on the front, I don't even think those are not my words. Those words in German, I didn't write those words. I almost feel like it's not my book, but
Right.
I get paid for it. So yippee.
I just had a really outstanding, wonderful woman named Yannick Nelson. I'm sorry, I mispronounced her name. Yannick Nelson. She's going to kill me for that. And her business is all about translation and localization, and which is an interesting concept because I've had work translated numerous times, but localization is all about getting in there and finding the idioms that apply to that culture and that sort of thing. Is so when you had your work translated, was that something that was part of the process?
I think that's more important for things, for example, Spanish. You've got obviously Spain versus some of the South American countries versus North American Hispanic Spanish speakers. So I think that would be important there. But German, I've got German, Italian. German and Italian, I don't think would be so important.
Yeah.
In terms of localization. I do have Spanish, and my translator is Colombian but living in Spain. And we were aiming at, I think you have to decide who you're aiming at. We were aiming at the North American market, so
Okay.
it's it's possibly a kind of confused version.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Again, it's and my Portuguese. I'm going to have Portuguese next year, and my translator is in Brazil. He's Brazilian, so it's. I think when you're looking at, it's important to look at the market. So, for example, I really believe Brazil is going to be a big emerging market for digital in the next couple of years. Germany's obviously taken off, but Brazil is a booming economy, and they all have smartphones and tablets and whatever.
Right.
So and Amazon's there, Kobo's there, iBooks is there. It's going to be next. So Portuguese for Brazil, is better than Portuguese for Portugal.
Okay, making a note. Get my books translated to Portuguese. Got it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the next. Germany and then Brazil, and then I'm not sure what else.
Well, and I had heard Germany, and I'd also, there's a push right now. This is coming to me from outside our group, but the market in China, but there's multiple markets there that you have to aim for. So it's not as simple. It's a bit like saying I want it in Portuguese, but I want it in Portuguese for Brazil. There's like 15 different
Yeah.
dialects or
Well,
something.
the problem with China right now is it's also not easy to self-publish.
Yeah,
So and also, I mean, I think about Arabic. I mean, Arabic is the Arabic-speaking world is a huge market, not even started yet in
right.
terms of digital. There's so many exciting. We are literally toddling in this market right now. We're only in like year 3 or year 4 of this is the rest of our lives type of excitement.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, what I've been guilty of and still am all the time is I jump in. I'm too early. I'm often too early
Yeah.
in a market. So I jumped into audio before ACX moved into the UK. So I lost money on that. I jumped into translations in markets like Italy, which just isn't mature enough to
Right.
really bother with. So I'm trying not to jump into China right now because I know a few people who are starting various sites there. But I do think it won't be long before we can reach all of these places. But equally, we have to remember that those places will also have a whole load of new authors who are excited as well. So,
That's true.
um, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be. And one a really interesting thing as well is I get emails from people, Indians mainly at the moment, because Amazon's opened in India, saying, should I change my name to an anglicized version in order to sell in the West? Which is an awful question because you
Yeah.
feel like saying, no, man, you should be proud of your
Yeah.
name.
Hold on to your
But
cultural identity.
yeah, but then you look at actually how the reality of many people's buying habits.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, yeah, maybe you should. But I think this is interesting because I then think about it the other way. Will my name be interpreted negatively in China or will you be interpreted because you're an American man badly in a country where that isn't so popular?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I think we're looking at really interesting cultural stuff. But I'm now selling in 61 countries, so it's pretty exciting already.
Excellent. Yeah. I'm in 3, so you're way ahead of me.
Oh, well, sort it out. What
I
are you
guess
doing?
actually no, I'm in 3. I aimed for 3. I'm in more, so by accident. So I
Yeah.
need to count it all up. So yeah, you're right though, and I wonder actually do you think in publishing in itself may not do this, may not be enough for this, but do you think as this grows, this idea of the online culture that's developing, do you think eventually it'll be a kind of a big great equalizer, and so at some point the white guy from America isn't going to be judged quite so harshly, and they're going to judge on the work? I mean, you think it's heading that way at all?
I think what will happen is, I try not to think about demographics
Yeah.
in terms of, my books are supernatural thrillers. I have a degree in theology, but I'm not a Christian, so
Yeah.
it makes things quite complicated. So, I've tried to pin down like who will like my books. It's not actually women aged 38 in,
Yeah.
North America. I have people from all around the world. Christians in Portugal. That's my translator is a Catholic in Brazil who wants to translate in Portuguese. I have there. So when you think about more demographics, so Dan Brown's book, for example, I know that he has a massive audience in the Middle East. He just spoke at Sharjah,
Yeah.
in Dubai, so or wherever it was, Abu Dhabi, whatever it was, in the Gulf states. So religious thrillers about the Christian world can still be popular in odd places. So
Yeah.
I think if it may be that your ideal audience is in South Korea, or there might be like Gangnam Style was so big
Yeah.
around the world. A South Korean author may take off in America. So I'm excited about the equalization, as you say.
Yeah.
And I think that this sort of finding little markets all around the world is just hugely exciting.
Yeah, and it changes the game a little though, as far if you start considering writing for those markets. I mean, I know my ideal reader. I'm hard pressed to say whether that ideal reader is going to exist in some of these other foreign markets. So how do you accommodate that?
Well, but that's what I mean. I think
Yeah.
you can't know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
went to a World Press Photo thing last weekend, and there was this just amazing picture of a whole load of people standing on the edge of Djibouti, with their cell phones
Yeah.
held up to the sky. I don't know if you've seen that picture. They're all trying to get cell phone coverage. If you think that cell phone penetration in sub-Saharan Africa, in South America, in India, Asia, cell phones are what will shift this world.
Right.
So, and people want escape. This is the thing. People want entertainment and escape from their miserable lives, whether they're working an office job in Manhattan or living in like the path of an earth, a tsunami in Indonesia. It's the same desire to escape their life for a couple of hours. So I think you can these, and also I interviewed David Farland, who is a writing teacher who taught, Stephanie Meyer and
Yeah.
all these, he breaks down the $1 million kind of best-selling formula, or whatever you want to call it. And he said that escape and transportation is one of the most important things around writing a blockbuster. So you have to transport people out of their situation.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, your book about where you live may actually be more interesting to somebody across the other side of the world.
Wow, what an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah, or you know what I mean? And I should also, sorry, I was just saying, people want entertainment, they want information, and they want inspiration. So as long as you are delivering that, I think people will be interested in your books wherever, around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite a good point, actually, because that's like here, there are some genres that are fairly saturated, like science fiction, which happens to be my genre, that are difficult to crack into, just casually. But elsewhere, that may not be the case, just because it depends on the angle you take with the work, right?
Yeah, and also, with self-publishing, because you do publish globally, as these stores open around the world. And the other thing I think about the global market is the pricing, because indies tend to price lower than traditional publishing. So, for example, a brand new, a new author with their first science fiction book with a traditional publisher will probably be priced at $8.99, $9.99 or whatever, maybe more than that, and may sell a few copies in America. But there's no way people, let's say in Nigeria is another good example of, the fastest growing economy in Africa, a lot of oil wealth, a lot of Chinese investment. Those people, sort of have money to spend, a growing middle class, but still not necessarily that price. So are more likely to find indie books because the price, when you go through an exchange rate difference, is more affordable. So India is another great thing. There's more English speakers in India than there are in America, I think. It's kind of crazy. It's just this amazing English speaking market.
Judging by Facebook, I think you're probably right.
Yeah. But this is the thing, I love, I think maybe because I'm in Europe and I have a very international family and I've traveled a lot, but I tend to think globally rather than a lot of the Americans I speak to get depressed and say, oh my goodness, the market's so saturated. It's like, really? I don't think you're thinking about the rest of the world here.
Yeah. Interesting. Change your perspective and you can boost your sales.
Yeah.
Well, that's a ongoing battle. Actually, I just like every other indie author, I face the question of how to approach those markets. So, if you were, you write supernatural thrillers, right? That's is that the actual genre? Is there a category on Amazon for supernatural?
There is not a category on Amazon. It's a campaign of mine.
It was a loaded question.
Yeah, I know. I'm campaigning for this. Well, it's so annoying because there is one in the BSAC categories, but not on Kindle. So I am trying to get that changed. But yeah, essentially, I write kind of supernatural religious thrillers, but they're not religious because I'm not Christian.
Which is an interesting thing to say, because it doesn't have to be Christian to be religious, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I want to write one about Hindu gods,
Yeah.
and I mean that's clearly not Christian, but it's interesting. The same market as Dan Brown really is my kind of market. That
Yeah.
action adventure, learn stuff, but still, well, in fact, more supernatural. I have a lot of demons in my books. There's
Yeah.
a lot of Stephen King influence in my books,
It's not a good
but
book
yeah.
unless there's a demon in it.
Yeah, that seems to be happening to me. I'm just writing One Day in New York, which is going to be a novella. And, I was like, I need to write something original about New York, which is quite difficult. But obviously, there are a lot of demons in my New York.
Yeah. Well, I think that may be true, actually.
Yeah, true. Anyway,
Are you in New York frequently?
no, I've been
No?
I've been twice,
Oh, okay.
but I want to. I have a sort of series of novellas. I have One Day in Budapest and Day of the
Oh,
Vikings,
I see. Yeah.
sort of a day somewhere where something happens and mysteries and thrilling things and mysterious things happen. So I thought I would do New York next.
Well, the great thing about New York, especially New York City, is that you've got plenty of reference material out there. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's just fascinating. I tend to do a lot of research. My books are basically 90% based on reality. So you'll find everything's based on real stuff and real places and real objects. And then I just take it just that little bit further into the supernatural side of things.
yeah,
So that to me, I do a lot of research because I want to fool people into believing it could be real.
yeah.
That's my point.
So we talked. You mentioned earlier that you're surprised when people say they want to write but they don't read. But here's the odd thing that I've discovered is that frequently authors read something completely different than the genre in which they write. So is that you, or are you all about
I
Stephen
read
King?
everything. I read. I mean, we got rid of our TV like 6 years ago. We download a few shows, but I
Yeah.
mean, I just read all the time. I read between 3 and 7 books a week, probably.
Yeah.
I spend so much money on my Kindle, but
Keep that industry going,
oh, I do. This is the
single-handed.
thing. I love reading. I mean, I do read a lot of thrillers. Horror, mystery, but I also read literary fiction. I read,
Yeah.
some science fiction, some techno thrillers. I read a lot of nonfiction, a lot of business, entrepreneurship. Just today, I got the new Tony Robbins book about money.
Oh, I'm waiting to get. Yeah, that's coming in.
Yeah, that should arrive
I
today.
don't know why I ordered that in hardback rather than.
Yeah, get the Kindle as well.
Yeah,
It's really,
I will. Yeah.
it's Tony Robbins being someone who kind of, changed my life when I was really miserable. I read
Yeah.
his books and listened to his stuff. And, so I read, I love to learn and I love to escape. So I just read a lot. I love reading. I think it's awesome.
So who would you peg as your biggest influences?
Well,
That's
Stephen
such a
King.
generic question. I feel like I should ask something else, but I do want to know the
No,
answer to
no,
that.
I've got on my list of blog posts to write, this answering this question because I want to think about it more. But Stephen King, certainly in terms of The Stand being my I think good versus evil, it is a big deal for me.
Yeah.
It's the theme of all of my books, basically,
Yeah,
good
yeah.
versus evil, as King does. James Rollins, he's
yeah.
a big, American action adventure novelist. His Sigma series is kind of what I modeled my Arcane series on, a secret agency that, deals with supernatural mysteries around the world. So Rollins books, I love. Dan Brown kind of that when the Da Vinci Code came out, because I did theology, I have this, a lot of religious knowledge. And I before that, Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose had been kind of what I thought I had to write in order to use my theological background in a novel.
Yeah.
But actually, I tried to reread that book quite recently, and I just didn't like it at all. It must, it was probably 25 years ago when it originally came out. But Dan Brown popularized that kind of story and made it possible for people like me to find a niche. So I still credit Dan Brown, although, bless him, his books have not got better.
No, it's funny. Years ago, I interviewed a young Dan Brown when he
Oh,
released
really?
Digital Fortress, And
Oh my goodness. Did you know? You didn't know
I
then.
had no
You
idea.
can't.
Yeah, no, I had no idea. And in
Oh,
fact, it
but like
was.
I'm wow, I'm like, okay, you interviewed a young Joanna Penn. How's that?
Yes, all right. Hopefully, though, yes. And I realized right away she was going
You
to be a
realize right away I'm gonna
superstar.
be, sell hundreds of millions of
If
books.
I had known, because he and I had a whole discussion after the show in
Mm,
which, I was very interested in writing at that point, but I hadn't actually written a book. And
mm.
I had started. I have my collection of what I call my thirds, which are the
Mm.
first third of a novel.
Yeah.
So I had talked to him about that. I'm like, oh, so how'd you get in? How'd you do? How'd you write? And he gave me some tips and pointers. And he's like, if you ever want to just throw something my way, let me know. And I'm like, I didn't, and now I'm like,
Oh,
oh
you
Jesus.
could have got a blurb from Dan Brown.
Yeah,
Oh,
well, oh well.
whatever. No, but this is the thing. I think the Da Vinci Code brought in a whole new subgenre. What's
Yeah,
so interesting is there isn't a category for it on Amazon, which is really
I
annoying.
I find that pretty annoying too because that, frankly, that's a particular. It is a category of books. If I want to read something like Dan Brown, how do I
Yeah,
find it on
I
Amazon?
know. And this is what I keep emailing them. It is my kind of little campaign. If anyone listening also writes this kind of thing, please email Amazon and say, can we have thrillers, supernatural?
I'm in. Count me in. I will write. I'll use. In fact, I'll get everybody I know to to
Yeah, just
start
do it.
pinging them.
And this is the thing, as a reader, this is for me as a reader, like you say, I want to find these books too. So I think over time, again, we're still at the beginning of this stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
I do believe that more and more the discovery engines will understand what the hell's going on.
yeah.
And I don't think we're seeing where the maturity of it. Yeah, Amazon clearly has the best discovery engine possible at the moment, but it's going to get better.
Yeah.
It will get to a point where I can say I like this and this and this, and then I am notified of all kinds of new books in that
Right.
genre.
And I think that right now it's interesting because it's interesting to say that it's new or that it's fairly young because we know it's been around. A lot of this has been around for a very long time. I mean,
But not digital.
yeah,
Self-publishing has, but the Kindle changed everything.
you're right. Yeah,
It made there's no way I could have given up my job and be making a living and be making the money I do without the Kindle. And this is, it's, and also as a reader, I don't, people going, oh, but it's destroying books. Completely wrong.
yeah,
People who shift the Kindle buy 3 to 5 times as many books
yeah.
as they used to.
Oh, I buy much more than I used to, and
Yeah,
I
exactly.
always bought a ton. So
Yeah, I know. Well, we're super readers.
yeah, yeah,
But that's the thing. I mean, we are in the beginnings of a digital industry. I mean, audio only, Amazon's audiobooks and acx.com, which allows us to self-publish audio,
yeah.
only launched in the UK in April.
Hmm.
And we're recording this in November. It's like
Right.
6 months. I mean, this is so new. It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm already seeing. I mean, I have a couple of books in process there, and
Mhm.
I had some bad experiences, which caused me to have to start over. But on the whole, I think for a brand new baby fresh service, they've got something. Like it's a good start,
They
and I'm
have.
seeing more like
Yeah.
that pop up.
Well, exactly. And you've got to think again with audio, Amazon transformed the industry for digital ebooks
Yeah,
and made it possible for other companies, to come in as well. Nook's not doing so well, but Kobo, I believe in. And Kobo have a Japanese CEO, which I think is a very important point.
yes, yeah,
Asia could belong to Kobo, and iBooks certainly is, I think, will continue to be a serious player. And they just included the iBooks app into the iOS 8, so it's on every device now. So,
hmm,
I think Amazon changed the digital ebook space. They are aiming to change the audio space,
yeah,
and so I definitely think audio. I mean, look at the rise in podcasting. Because of smartphones, people
right.
are listening to more and more audio. So, yeah, you want to reach people however they consume your book.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting, Amazon's doing that whole if you own finally, I begged for this for years, but if you own the ebook, or actually I think it even extends to the hardback now because I got pinged on, would you like the audio version of this book? And it was a book that I
Yes.
only owned in hardback. So,
And you can
uh,
get it for a couple of dollars or
yeah,
something.
which
Yeah.
is, hey, if you want to win me over, do that. I will buy every version of that book if I can just pay a couple of bucks.
Exactly. And so this is what's happening. Things they're really starting to push audio. So if you think of what they've done with ebooks, then things are going to just take off with
Yeah.
audio as they expand around the world. And certainly, like we mentioned, Germany. In Germany, the audiobook market is bigger than the ebook market. So
Yeah.
it's very exciting. So, I mean, authors should be thinking about, print, ebook, and audiobook
Yeah.
for their books. They should then be thinking about all the different country markets that you can sell in, and only then be thinking about translation, which is definitely bleeding edge right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting because all this points at this concept of the book is something beyond what is containing it. It's not just the ebook or print book, or it's like that book is this,
Magic.
non-physical
It's
thing.
magic.
Yeah. It's magic.
But
Yeah.
this
A
is
wizard
why,
did it.
yeah, but this is what's so funny is this is why publishers have so much money.
Oh, yeah.
Because authors think they sell one book, but they're not. They're basically licensing innumerable rights,
Right.
so many rights, and publishers have just been brilliant about chopping up all those rights and making loads of money from them and paying the authors between 7 and 25% royalty.
Yeah.
Now we can do it ourselves and get 70% royalty, at the top end. And audio, people complain about it, but it's still 40%
Yeah.
royalty.
I was one of those complaining, by the way.
Yeah, but it's like if you were going through a traditional publisher, I think you only get like 10% or less than that.
Yeah, I think it was just the fact that they yanked it back was what
Yeah,
made everyone upset.
it didn't bother me at all. I think, what's so funny is people moan, like people are moaning at the moment about
Yeah.
all kinds of things. It's like, seriously, just remember where we were
Yeah.
a couple of years ago. You wouldn't have made any money from your book.
Right. Yeah.
But I have a very glass half full attitude to
I'm going to
everything.
start being more like that. I'm
I'm just like, wow, I'm so lucky I get to write books, and like, wow, I used to be so miserable.
It is fantastic, though, because I have a whole new definition of who I am now based on this work. And thanks to people like you and, other podcasters that I follow, other authors that I follow. I mean, I redefined who I was based on this work and was influenced heavily by folks like you. So
Oh,
I have
well,
immense
thanks.
gratitude, and I just can't thank you enough for everything that you do for the community. And your work is wonderful. I'm a big fan, actually. I've only recently started reading all of your stuff. I read one book early on, and then I had to get through the rest of the pile. I have, how all of us are. We all have like you said, I buy
Big
like
pile.
12 times more books now than I used to.
Oh
So,
yeah, and I don't expect people to read my books. I mean, I have books for authors which I think will be useful. So, Business for Authors is my latest
Yeah.
nonfiction, which basically aims to teach people how to run a business as an author. And that one, I am passionate about helping people understand this stuff.
Yeah.
And I did get a lot of that knowledge from running my own companies before and things, and just applying that to being an author. But this thing about rights that we're saying, if that penny drops for people, it's like their life changes. It certainly
Yeah.
did for me when I truly understood that it was not one book, it was just a whole load of rights that you
Yeah.
can exploit. It just becomes, suddenly you realize this is a viable business. I'm very passionate about proving that you can have a great living as a creative person, and this kind of starving author in the garret is an old concept that we don't need to think about anymore. And actually, it mainly applies to traditional publishing.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I actually had a contract with a publisher who shall go unnamed
Oh.
on my first book, and then discovered through basic maths that I was going to be losing money on that deal pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So that was part of the inspiration to move over. So anyway, so that's you've been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm noticing that we passed the normal marker where I say we should wrap things up, and I don't want to soak up any more of your time.
Oh, no worries. I love talking about this stuff.
I know.
So I hope that's helped some people.
Yeah, me too. And more interesting for my audience, I think, is just hearing kind of the inside scoop about how you think about this stuff. And there's a lot of my audience. Some of my audience is from the self publishing world, and a lot
Mm,
isn't.
mm.
But it's difficult sometimes for me to explain to people what it is I do. And
Yeah.
so it's great to have people like you on who are really in the trenches on it. So thanks so much for that. And people can find out more about you. There, you got a couple of different, you got two or three different websites, right? You have
Yeah.
thecreativepen.com.
Yeah, so thecreativepen.com and pen with a double N, and
Yeah.
there's you can get to the podcast there, and I have a Author 2.0 blueprint, which I just rewrote, finished yesterday. I updated. That's a free ebook that says everything about self-publishing, and that's free. And then I have books and courses for authors, and my fiction is at jfpen.com. And that's F for Francis. And another little tip: if you're going to use initials, don't use an F. Sounds like S, it's
Yeah.
just a nightmare. So, yeah, always say your URL out loud before you buy it.
And I know I'm diverging again, but for a time I was writing under J.K. Tomlinson.
Yeah.
Just because I thought I might grab some of that J.K. Rowling traffic.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. It's just, it's interesting. Well, J.K. Tomlinson's quite good.
Yeah, I,
It sounds quite good.
I may go back to that actually. We'll see.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
nice one. But anyway, yeah. So, and also I'm on Twitter at the Creative Pen with a double N. If anyone wants to ask me any questions.
absolutely. You heard her. And you can, and of course, everybody, you can check out all these links in the show notes for this show, this episode. Check her out at creativepen2ns.com, the Creative Pen. Did I get it
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yeah, the Creative
I
Pen. Yeah.
typically flub that. TheCreativePen with 2ns.com. And you can find out more about me at kevintomlinson.com/podcast. That's where you can learn more about the show. You can catch up on past episodes, learn a little more about Joanna Penn, and, have a great time. So thanks a lot, Joanna. And I'm going to round us off now. And everybody at this point is probably hearing some really groovy music. So
Oh, thanks for having me, Kevin.
thank you so much for being on. Take care, everybody. Well, that was my interview with Joanna Penn. So that's another really exciting interview. I love when I can talk to people that I follow online because I get a whole new insight into them. And there's a weird sort of thing that happens. You sometimes feel like people are unreachable, and that because you're listening to them on a podcast or something that sounds very official, that somehow they're out of range and you're never going to be able to connect with those people. But the truth is, what I find more times than not is that people are really willing to have these conversations. They want to talk about their work, they want to talk about their lives, they want to share their story, and that's powerful because it's a lesson. There's a lesson there. I always quote my grandfather, who used to say that, and I quote that I never got a thing I never got a thing I didn't ask for, even if it was a punch in the mouth, which is a nice kind of a quirky way of saying that if you want something in life, you have to take a chance and go for it, ask for it. Sometimes asking for it means going out and just building something. And sometimes it just means getting on the phone and or sending an email and making a request. And you never know what you're going to get. Even the no's can sometimes be really interesting. I've been turned down for interviews in the past that turned into other relationships and then eventually became interviews. So at any rate, so here we are. We're closing out the new year, and it's been amazing. And I discussed some of this at the head of the show, but I really want to take a moment. I just want to say thank you so much for being in this audience, being a listener, for caring enough to hear the stories of the people that I talk to, for hearing my story, for being a supporter in all this. I'm so very grateful because this show gives me an opportunity to do some of the things that I've always dreamt of doing. And it gives me really a great excuse for talking to people and getting their stories and learning more about them and building relationships with them. And that's been invaluable to me. But it couldn't happen. It wouldn't be worth doing if someone wasn't out there listening. So thank you so much for being a part of a great first start, of a great first year. I didn't start this until late into the year, but into 2014. But now that it's rolling, I feel like it's just been a part of my life for a really long time now. I'm really pleased with how it's going. So I hope you are too. And if you are, please feel free to, look me up, chat me up, get online, go to kevintomlinson.com/podcast, where you can actually leave me a voicemail directly from your computer. And, I'm refining this stuff all the time. So eventually there's going to be a phone number there if there's not already. So you can just dial in. There are all kinds of ways to reach me. You can also send an email. If you leave a voicemail with any questions for any of my guests or myself, I'd love to play it on air. I'll pass those along to the guests and see if I can get answers for you. Anything you want. So let me know. As we close out and now we're looking at this point, you're probably listening in 2015 or beyond. I just want to say once again, Happy New Year to you. And, God bless you in what you're doing and what you're planning for your year. I hope you have just this amazing, prosperous year. And I know you can. And that comes from shaping your own story. I think that if you look closely at the world around you, there's a lot of lessons. There are a lot of lessons to be learned from the stories of others. And there's a lot of material out there that you can use to build your own story and shape your own life. And I really hope that you'll let me be a part of that. Just, anytime you've got an interesting story, why don't you share that with me? Go ahead and go online to the Wordslinger podcast, landing page there. Eventually a site. Hopefully there's a site coming soon. So as soon as I work out all the bugs. But, anytime you want to get in touch, just please do, because I love talking to people from all walks of life. If you've listened to this show at all, beyond this episode, you're going to see that I talk to just a really eclectic bunch of folks and about all sorts of topics. There's nothing that's really, off limits per se. I mean, I have my personal lines and I like to keep things a little clean, but, there's nothing that I wouldn't at least try to talk about. And the people that I talk to are wonderful. And that's another thing that I want to express my gratitude for. Is if you've been a guest on the show, I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you sharing your story. And I appreciate you being an inspiration to me. And every guest I've had has been. Everyone. We've had guests on here that have talked about everything from, video blogging to cartooning. Actually, that one's coming up. You're going to get a chance to hear from John Kovalik in a future episode. He's a cartoonist known for Dork Tower. I almost said the entirely wrong name, John. Sorry about that. And I've got more episodes lined up that I think you're going to find fascinating. And every one of these is a chance to learn something new and grow as a person. And that's really what I'm after. So I love every one of you. I respect every one of you, guests and listeners alike. And I hope you have a fantastic new year. So that's it for 2014 and the Wordslinger podcast. From me and my family to all of you, God bless. Have a wonderful and safe holiday. Have a wonderful and safe year to come. And we'll see you in 2015.
Wordslinger.